Welcome to another edition of Laid Back History. This is a special episode for Black History Month 2022, and we're really excited to give you a behind-the-scenes look at a new project that we're working on here at the Historical Society. And we're focusing on Black-owned businesses of the early 20th century. And this project was actually suggested to us by Dean Ellis last year, and we've had the opportunity to gather up some resources, and we want to show you how we're coming along with this interesting project. So first of all, I'd like to tell you a little bit about all the different resources that we're pulling together for this effort. So first of all, we have city directories, the first of which is actually a regional directory from 1859. And we have some more recent directories from the early 1900s, and those focus on the towns in the county, such as Washington or Canonsburg. Very, very useful resources. Now, we also have come upon a resource called the Pennsylvania Negro Business Directory, which was published in 1910. And Washington has a number of entries in this directory which are going to be very useful for us. And as we go on further in time, we have also the famous Green Book directory. And this page that I'm showing you is an example of a Green Book that was published in 1935. Now, in addition to the directories, we have map resources. And what I'm showing you here today are two very important resources. One is a Sanborn Fire Insurance set of maps dated 1925. And the other, in the foreground here, is a plat map for the city of Washington, dated about 1932. So when we pull all these resources together, we get a lot of wonderful information, and we want to share a little bit of it with you today. So the history of the African-American community here in Washington goes back to the very earliest days of the county. In fact, African-Americans were present here when the county was formed in 1781. So fast forward to the 1850s, and you have a number of Black-owned businesses. And just one example of a Black-owned business was a gunsmith shop that was owned by Tower Adams. And we know that he had a shop at the corner of West Chestnut and what was then First. And here's an image from the 1859 directory showing that. Coming forward in time, of course, there were many, many other Black-owned businesses in the 19th century. Coming forward to the early 20th century, the African-American business community was very well established, and we have a number of very interesting businesses at that point in time. So I'm going to go through them just to give you a taste of what we're working on here. So the first is a restaurant that was operated by William Allen. And William Allen was a man born in 1874 in Kentucky and migrated north here to southwest Pennsylvania. And he opened up a restaurant at 147 North Lincoln Street. And he also was a seller of cigars and tobacco products. And here's an image of that 1910 Negro Business Directory, an ad that William Allen apparently placed in it. Another business was that of Isaac Asbury. And Isaac Asbury operated a barber shop. And Isaac was born in West Middletown in 1864 and then came to live here in the town of Washington. What's also interesting about Isaac is that he was one of the earliest semi-professional baseball players here in Washington. So a very interesting figure in the local community. He was also the grandson of one of our well-researched Underground Railroad agents, William Asbury, who was operating in the Underground Railroad out in Cross Creek Township. So Isaac Asbury's barber shop, we believe, was located at 10 East Bow Street. So again, we have more to learn about Isaac. We know that there is a photo that has survived of Isaac. We don't have it yet, but we're working on that. The next business is also very interesting. This was a grocery and general merchandise store that was operated by Putnam Bolden. And Putnam Bolden was born in 1851 in Amelia County, Virginia. Again, came north to Washington and set up shop at 130 North Lincoln Street and operated that store for many years. And here is the photo of him standing in front of his store. He died here in Washington in 1923, but was very, very successful, and many of you will remember the name Bolden of that family. You know, there are many other Boldens who are very successful here in Washington, Pennsylvania, including the very well-known journalist for the Pittsburgh Courier, Frank Bolden. The next person that we'll talk about is Alice Brooks. And Alice operated the Ladies and Gents Restaurant at 208 North College Street. Alice is an interesting character. She was born in Canada, apparently, and we don't really know how it was that she migrated to southwestern Pennsylvania. But by the year 1900, it's clear that she was operating a restaurant, first in Charleroi and then here in Washington. And we're very, very fortunate to have this wonderful photo of Alice. We don't know much about her after about 1915, 1916. We don't know where she went, so our research is ongoing. At the corner of North Main and East Chestnut was the Eagle Pool Room. And the Eagle Pool Room was operated by George Yancey Fields. And George Fields was born in 1876 in Ohio. Again, found opportunity here in Washington, Pennsylvania, and operated that pool room for many years. He eventually retired down to Florida, where he passed away in 1950. Now, if you wanted painting done in the early part of the 20th century, you would have contacted Adam Highgates. And Adam operated a painting business from his home at 201 East Walnut Street. He was also one of the earliest known black police officers on the Washington police force. And that's a subject that we'll be delving into in another future episode. But Adam Highgates was known as a very, very accomplished painter. Now, the next person that we're going to look at was a physician, and Dr. Leonard C Honesty was a very well-known physician here in Washington for many years. I'm sure some of our viewers may have known of him. Dr. Honesty was born in 1875 in Tennessee, attended the University of Michigan, studied medicine in Michigan, and opened up a medical practice here in Washington at 141 North College Street. And practiced here for, I believe, nearly a half century. Very, very well known, very well respected in the community. The interesting thing about Dr. Honesty is that he had a person that came before him that kind of broke the ground for him, and that was a doctor by the name of Frank Johnson. And Frank Johnson's full name was Francis Julius Lemoyne Johnson. And Dr. Johnson was born here in southwestern Pennsylvania in 1871. And obviously he was named for Dr. Francis Julius Lemoyne, whose home we're speaking to you from today. And Dr. Johnson studied medicine at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. He had a brother by the name of Frederick Douglass Johnson, and his father had been previously the coroner for Washington County. So he had a very interesting family background. We're very fortunate to have these images of Dr. Francis Julius Lemoyne Johnson. We're going to switch gears for our next profile and talk about the catering business. And at 42 Oregon Street was the home and the center for the catering business operated by Lewis Mosby. And Lewis was born in 1865 here in Washington, lived his entire life here until his death in 1935. In addition to the catering business, Lewis Mosby was the assistant superintendent of county buildings, a role that he held for many years. The 1910 Negro Business Directory shows this very interesting image of Lewis Mosby's house. Another business that was operated under the Mosby name was the Mosby Beauty Parlor. And that business was operated by Nanny Mosby. And she had the Mosby Beauty Parlor shop at 161 South Main Street. And Nanny Mosby was born here in Washington in 1858, lived her entire life here until passing away in 1929. And when she did pass, this very, very interesting article was published in the Pittsburgh Courier. We turn now to blacksmithing, and the business of Tobias and Wilson was well known in the blacksmithing field here in Washington. And that business was operated by James Tobias and James Wilson. Now, James Tobias, first of all, was a blacksmith for nearly 70 years here in Washington. And he operated shops at different locations. In 1910, we believe that his shop was on West Strawberry Alley, but the shop was moved from time to time. And his partner for a period of time was James Wilson. James Wilson was a person born in Virginia and again had migrated up here for business opportunity to Washington. But he passed away relatively young in 1924, leaving James Tobias to carry on the business. Now the next person that we'll talk about briefly is Reuben Wassler. And we could really devote an entire episode just to Reuben Wassler because he is that interesting of a figure in our county's history. Reuben Wassler was at various times a policeman on the Washington police force. He was a veteran of World War I. He was a promoter of sports and entertainment programs. Reuben Wassler was born in Washington County in 1891, and he was a grandson of William Wassler, who is known as an Underground Railroad agent in Chartiers Township. So Reuben Wassler was born into a family that was committed to activism. During his years in the service during World War I, Reuben Wassler became a songwriter and gained some notoriety as a songwriter. He also attained the rank of corporal during his service. And he returned to Washington after the war and became engaged in the promotion of sports and entertainment. For example, he was the promoter of car races at Arden Downs. He was also the proprietor of the swimming venue and the picnic venue, and also dance and performance venue at Norris Beach, just east of Washington. And as I said earlier, he was also a patrolman on the Washington police force a bit later. So Reuben Wassler is definitely a figure that we're going to be doing further research on. Again, in the restaurant field, the Royal Cafe was at 101 East Chestnut Street, and the Royal Cafe was operated by George Wicks. George was a native of Virginia, again, who came north for opportunity here in Washington and operated that cafe for a number of years. He passed away in 1936 in Canonsburg. And finally, we're going to talk about the tailoring shop of John Ware that was located at 160 North Main Street. And we have this wonderful photo of John Ware from the 1910 Negro Business Directory. John Ware had been born in 1876, and he lived most of his life here in Washington, passing away in 1970. So this is just a sampling of the many Black-owned businesses that we're going to be studying here at the Historical Society. The Historical Society is not the only organization that's taken an interest in this subject matter. About a dozen years ago, the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission began studying the African-American community here in Washington, Pennsylvania, as one of 9 communities selected statewide for examination. And the commission has looked at businesses and cultural institutions that were here and that are no longer here, as well as things that were here and still are here. And we continue to kind of take that tack going forward with our own study. We're going to look at things that are both continuing and try to explore how it was that these businesses were formed and how it is that they continue. And we're going to look at things that simply aren't here anymore and try to understand a little bit about what their history was. So with these wonderful resources that we have, the directories, the maps, and other resources, we intend to really bring this together and provide a full history of Black-owned businesses from the inception of the county all the way through the modern era. So we look forward to bringing you more on this very interesting subject matter in future episodes. Thank you for tuning in to this special episode of Laid Back History for Black History Month 2022. We look forward to seeing you again for another installment on this critical area of study of Black-owned businesses. Thank you.